Hey everyone, this is Dr. David Song at the Rehab Hero Clinic, and today we'll be talking about groin strains. So let's dig deep. So before we get started, it's really important that we talk about how you know this is a groin strain. Now, just like any other strain, a strain could be graded between grades 1 to 3. Grade 3 most often requires surgical intervention, so please consult your orthopedic surgeon before trying any of these exercises if it's a grade 3 strain. Most typically, strains are going to be between the grade 1 and grade 2 level. If you have a grade 2 strain, you're going to see a lot of bruising, a lot of swelling from the injury. Most strains are grade 1, which means that you don't usually see a lot of swelling or bruising on the surface of the muscle. Grade 1 strains also tend to be the most common. The groin has a group of muscles called the hip adductors, which are responsible for pulling the leg towards the midline. Basically, it gets your leg from out here and pulls it in towards the center of your body. Because this muscle does a lot of stabilization while you're doing these activities of daily living, it can actually be quite debilitating even if you have a grade 1 strain. It can affect the way you walk, affect the way you run, affect the way you do anything really. Within the groin region, you do have some of your hip flexors as well. And hip flexion is just raising the leg upwards. This can also make it hard for you to do things like lifting your leg up when you're on your bed. It can hurt when you're rolling over in bed. And once again, because you have to raise the leg, it can hurt while you walk or when you go up the set of stairs. So today we'll be going over exercises that you could do in both the acute and subacute phases of healing. Generally speaking, the acute stages of healing will be the first 3 to 5 days following your injury, with the subacute phase of healing lasting between 4 days to 2 weeks. In the beginning, we like to start with light isometric contractions. Basically, we want to make sure that we still maintain our strength levels. It is important that we do not actually do anything to aggravate your symptoms too much in the acute phases of healing. We don't want to restrain the muscle that we're targeting. So stick within pain-free reps and pain-free range of motions. Today, we'll also be going over some functional exercises that you can do that will help you return to the activities of your daily living or your sport. These exercises are done once the subacute stages of healing are done. First, we're going to start with isometric squeezes. So let's get started. This exercise that we're going to do is going to require something like a foam roller. You can also use a yoga block. Really, you need anything that you could put between your knees. So even a folded up towel does the trick. What we're going to do is an isometric contraction of your hip adductor muscles while you're in a seated position. With regards to this isometric contraction, there is no real range of motion that we're working on. We're really working on just contracting the muscle. For this exercise, you want to do as big of a contraction as you possibly can without it actually causing pain. So what you're going to do is you're going to start by placing it between your knees, and you can use your hands to stabilize it in place. From here, you're going to squeeze the foam roller between your knees. This will get your hip adductor muscles to engage. Generally, you want to do a 7-second isometric hold. You also want to slowly ramp up into your contraction. So the first 2 seconds should be a slow, gradual increase in your contraction, and the last 2 seconds should be a slow release of that contraction. So here we go. So I'm going to slowly ramp in, squeeze 1, 2, 3, and then slowly relax. From here, you want to do a 5-second rest, and you're going to repeat this. 4, 5, and slowly release, and go for a 5-second rest. So as you can tell, it's really hard to see if I'm actually doing anything, but you'll feel your muscles activating. If you feel some pain while you're doing this exercise, all you gotta do is decrease the amount of contraction that you're doing, so don't squeeze as hard, and you're going to rest. You can do about 2 sets, and you could aim for anywhere between 8 to 10 repetitions. You can also do this daily during the acute stages of healing. Next, since some of the groin muscles are responsible for hip flexion, which is raising the knee towards the ceiling, we're going to also do an isometric contraction with this, just using your hands. This exercise is called a seated isometric hip flexion exercise. So let's say I strain my left groin, so this is obviously going to be the one that I target. All I'm going to do is go and place my hands on that knee, and I'm going to use my hip flexors to just push my knee into my hand. Once again, this is an isometric contraction, meaning that you won't have any movement occurring during this exercise. You're just going to feel the hip flexors activate and contract. While you're doing this exercise, once again, it's important to ramp up for the first 2 seconds of the contraction, go for a maximal tolerable contraction for the following 3 to 4 seconds, and then slowly release for another 2 seconds. You want to give yourself 5 seconds of rest between your isometric contractions. And just like the other exercise, we can do 8 to 10 repetitions and 2 sets daily during the acute stages of healing. All right, so next we're going to move on to the subacute stages of healing. We're going to do some active range exercises that will just use your body weight. I mentioned before, the goals of the subacute stages of healing is to actually work on your active range of motion. Really, we're only going to use your own body weight as resistance. So once again, assuming that my left leg was the one that had the groin strain, we're going to start by lying down on our side, to work this leg in hip adduction. First, we go into a sideline sleeper position. You could take your top leg and put it over on top to give yourself some stabilization. You're going to make sure that your target leg is on the bottom here. From here, all you're going to do is raise that leg up towards the ceiling. You're going to hold this for up to 10 seconds, if you can tolerate it. And then slowly lower it back down to the floor. You're going to go for a 1-to-1 rest to work ratio. So 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And you're going to repeat and go for it again. Now, as you can see, this exercise is fairly unloaded. And if you actually have a healthy hip adductor, this won't feel like much work at all. But since you have a groin strain, this will actually provide a great amount of difficulty. While you're doing this exercise, you're also making sure that you're trying to raise that foot as close to the ceiling as possible with each repetition. But make sure that if you are still experiencing some pain, that you stick within the range of motion that is pain-free. If that means you can only go halfway or barely off the floor, that's fine. All right, so the next exercise that we're going to do is pretty much the same thing, but we're going to go into hip flexion. With this exercise, a bit of rounding of the low back is expected. Now, since it's unloaded, it won't harm your back at all. It's no different than sitting down any other time with a rounded back. But if you want to maintain as much of a neutral spine as possible, you can do that easily by leaning backwards. So for this exercise, you're going to bend the non-target leg and you're going to hug it close to your chest. You're going to actually use this as support so that you can keep your back a little bit straighter by leaning back. From here, you're just going to raise your target leg up for about 10 seconds. And then you're going to lower it for another 10 seconds to give yourself a 1-to-1 ratio rest. Once again, for this exercise, you want to stick within a range of motion that is pain-free. If that means you could go only halfway up, that's fine to start with. These exercises are completed during the subacute stages of healing, which is anywhere between 4 to 14 days following your initial injury. If these exercises hurt too much to even start doing, you want to stick with just the isometric contractions that we just went over that occur during the acute stages of healing. Next, we're going to go and move on to the functional exercises that will challenge your hip adductors for balance-based movements. So let's move on. Next, we're going to use a pull-up assist band to help us during this next exercise. You can use any band as long as it's able to loop around your knee. What you're going to do is find a stable object like a squat rack or a hand railing. If you have a door anchor, that works as well too. And from here, you're going to loop it around just above the knee. From here, you're going to step out so that there's some tension going on here. And then you're going to assume a split squat position because we want to work the hip adductors while we're doing a lunge type of movement or a split squat type of movement. The reason why we're doing that is to mimic going up a set of stairs, walking, or running as much as possible while in a controlled environment. The band's going to try to pull my hip into hip abduction, which is outwards. So my groin or hip adductors will have to activate to stabilize against the band. From here, we're just going to do a regular split squat. So you're just going to come down. Your knee does not have to tap the floor. And then you come back up. If you want to tap the floor, you can. But just make sure you're using a padded surface so that you don't end up getting any bruises on your knee. We're going to do anywhere between 12 to 15 repetitions as you can tolerate. If you want to increase the level of difficulty for this exercise, you're going to go from having your band above your knee to having the band below the knee. This will give the band a mechanical advantage over your hip adductors. While in the chronic stages of healing, which is after the first 2 weeks following your injury, this exercise can be done every other day. We can aim for anywhere between 2 to 3 sets now, since we're actually trying to challenge the muscle and facilitate muscle growth. The last exercise we're going to do is going to be a single leg deadlift. The single leg deadlift is a great exercise to do to get all the hip muscles to activate to stabilize the hip. Getting these other muscles worked is also going to help to decrease the amount of stress that your hip adductor is experiencing. So let's get started with the single leg deadlift. For the single leg deadlift, the left leg is going to be the one on the ground since that's the one that has the muscles that are affected. You're going to start by lifting the right leg off the ground. And you're going to give yourself a light bend in the knee. From here, it's really important that you keep your spine neutral so that this is a hip hinge movement and not a full bend movement. From here, you're going to just simultaneously push your hips backwards as you lower your hands to lower shin level. And then you're going to go straight back up. You don't need to touch the floor because that really will depend on the level of your hip mobility you have. And there's going to be some anatomical variance for that. For this exercise, We're going to aim for anywhere between 15 to 20 repetitions. Once again, this is done during the chronic stages of healing, which is after the first 2-week period following your injury. You're also going to stick with a range of motion that's pain-free. So if you can't go this far down, that's completely okay. That's your current baseline of fitness for that day. This also refers to the rep range as well. So if you can't hit 15 repetitions, you can only do 5, that's okay. You're going to try again in 2 days' time. Your body's going to have adapted and recovered from the last time you tried this exercise, and you should be able to do more. So that pretty much sums up all the exercises you can do for a groin strain, the acute, subacute, and chronic stages of healing. Basically, you want to go from just doing isometric contractions, active range of motion contractions, and then functional movements. If you like this content, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for weekly videos. If you have any questions about this type of condition, leave a comment below and I'll answer it ASAP. If you haven't checked out our other social media platforms, we have over 500,000 followers between Instagram and TikTok. I'll see you guys next week. See ya.